Hi everyone, my name is Samuel Simmons and welcome to my EDL 853 Special Education Interview. Welcome to SPED Talks. I want to give you guys a little bit of useful information about the schools and the individuals that I interviewed. My paraprofessional is in his second year in education, second year as a paraprofessional. He unfortunately has been split between two schools with the student count. Just recently he was moved to a different building. His first building, approximately 500 students in the building, and approximately 15% of those have an IEP. His second school, which is about 3 miles away, approximately 600 students, and roughly 18% of those have an IEP. Both are Title I schools. For my teacher, she works at the first school that my paraprofessional was at. And again, 500 students approximately, and approximately 15% of those have an IEP. And for my administrator, she's bounced around a couple different school districts. This is her 11th year in education. 8 were spent as a math teacher. The 2 after that were a building instructional coach, and this is her first year as an AP. And she's at a Title I high school with approximately 21% of students having an IEP. The most challenging part of their role with regards to SPED, my paraprofessional obviously was the transition that he is currently in with transition to a new school. For my teacher, it's really tough for her to balance the role of a SPED teacher when she has direct classes as well as collaborative classes, and just lack of time. Not enough time. I think all teachers feel that way. And for the administrator, very similar to the paraprofessional, new school, new building, new relationships, so trying to spend that time of getting to know everyone and then balancing all of her duties as an assistant principal. The most rewarding part for my paraprofessional, watching that light bulb bust was his exact words. When students actually get in, they can start working independently and autonomously. For my teacher, is when her students start making growth goals. So they're able to, for those goals on their IEP, they're able to start exceeding those goals, which could help them move into collaborative classes or gen ed classes. For my administrator, her biggest one, she's all about team and family. And she loves working with parents, especially compliant parents who are fully engaged and active participants. Advice on supervision of special education staff. My paraprofessional was adamant that he wants nothing to do with supervision. It's not his job. He is a self-reflector, and that is only going to supervise himself. And he's still working to understand his role anyway. So he didn't feel like he had a right to even think about what someone else was doing with their time. My teacher, kind of similar. It's not her job. However, she did feel like it's her job, and it's a challenging job to try to organize schedules of not only, SPED teachers, gen ed teachers that collab with the SPED teachers, and then with all the specialists and therapists that come in, she feels like she has to try to organize and set things up, whether it's meetings or times or locations for those folks, to service the young people. Advice from my administrator on supervision was she really felt that it's a challenge to try to supervise not only gen ed teachers, SPED teachers, but also paraprofessionals, and again, she's new. So she's still trying to build relationships and understand everyone's role and what level of expertise they have in their job. What do they do well? What support do they need? So that was her advice on supervising of SPED staff. Effectively working with parents, guardians of SPED students. For my paraprofessional, unfortunately, and he used the word unfortunately, he usually pushes this to the special education teacher, the certified special education teacher, to deal with the communication with parents. And normally, if he talks to parents or makes phone calls, he would rather make a phone call, set an appointment to talk with them face to face. And really, it's about his role, his duties, and what he's seen in the classroom. For my teacher, very frequent communicator. She is, whether it's letters, text, phone calls, social media, which I thought was funny, all type of things, to try to effectively communicate with parents and guardians. She talked about they're required to have that one IEP meeting per year. However, if students are progressing in their goals, then they can have an amendment, and with parents, obviously parent consent, that whole 10-day notice, and they can work on, possibly transitioning the student to collab classes or gen ed classes. And she also talked about having, trying to communicate with parents or guardians at least once a week, and even doing home visits if necessary. My administrator was critical to talk about communication is vital. You have to find a way to communicate with parents, regardless if phone numbers have changed or turned off, whatever you have to do to reach out and communicate with parents, she was adamant on making sure you did that. So collaborating with gen ed teachers. So my paraprofessional felt like at times, and again, this is one of those unfortunate things, he felt like he was a classroom manager. He was there to manage the behavior of not only special education students, but all students, which took him away from his job of supporting the special education students. There's little to no plan time, and plan times don't even match up for him, trying to collaborate with gen ed teachers. Half the time, he doesn't even know what the gen ed teacher is doing until he gets to class, which obviously takes away from, the purpose of having a paraprofessional. For my special education teacher, she gives all of her gen ed teachers the IEP at a glance, which really shows the goals and accommodations for those students who have that IEP and what those goals are and what the accommodations are. There's Q&A sessions. They try to steal as much time as possible in meetings to discuss these things. She talked about teachers being at the IEP meeting so they know what's going on, and all teachers are invited. They like to have at least one from each grade level as well as one elective teacher. For my administrator, she talked about for her collaborating with gen ed teachers, it's all about being at IEP meetings, POC meetings, and really just trusting, everyone in the special education department to just do their job. She trusts them to do their job. So advice for first year administrators. My paraprofessional was really big on just allow them to do their job. Trust that they're going to do the job that they have been hired to do. Possibly find a way to give plan time to your paraprofessional, and if it can be aligned with the gen ed teacher or even the special education teacher, that would be fantastic. If there's opportunities for professional learning, bring in a specialist or someone to not only provide that development for the special education department, but all teachers. Advice for first year administrator from my teacher was attend as many monthly meetings as possible. They have, in Kansas City, Kansas School District, we have special education instructional coaches, coordinators, executive directors, so tons of individuals that come in on a monthly basis. So be at all those meetings, be at the IEP meetings, understand the accommodations and how that could play a factor in the students and their behavior, and just don't walk around as the boss, that have that boss mentality. Advice from my administrator was read, learn, be a connected learner, collaborate as much as possible with other assistant principals, special education teachers, as many people as possible. Don't try to do everything because you'll probably just overwhelm yourself and feel a little stressed out, and know that it's going to be hard to support everyone, so, pick and choose what you can and cannot do, and then ask as many questions as possible, so make sure that you are asking as many questions as possible. So the role of SPED teacher and administrator was a question that kind of we didn't really quite know how to process that question. So my paraprofessional really got into the fact that for him, when he has a question, he goes to the SPED teacher. His training came from the special education teacher, not the administrator. So he was deciphering between those two roles, and he leans more heavily on the special education teacher than the administrator. My teacher was just big on accepting her role, knowing her role, and hopefully the administrator will allow her to just do her job. She has the knowledge and expertise in the special education realm, and she just asks for support, from that administrator as needed. My administrator kind of took this question a little bit different. When we got into, what do you see the difference between a SPED teacher, administrator, their roles, and she felt as though some of the special education teachers that she's seen not only this year, but in years past, she felt like there's not enough student autonomy. She felt like the gradual release of responsibility, that all four realms of the GRR wasn't being met. And she felt that fell onto the role of the SPED teacher of, not being so focused on delivering focused lessons and guided lessons, but getting into the collaborative work with those students and allowing them to work autonomously and independently. So what did they think were characteristics of an administrator, with regards to special education? For my paraprofessional, he wanted someone that was connected, someone that could relate to the staff and the students. He wanted someone that was able to build relationships, build and sustain relationships, something that I heard a lot throughout some parts of the questioning for these interviews. And just be out there, show great effort and energy, and in his words, act like you want to be there. For my teacher, characteristics of an administrator was just that knowledge, understand the process of the SIT plan, developing an IEP, how they get an IEP, the rights of the parents, and the accommodations, and knowing what those accommodations are. So just the knowledge of the whole process of an IEP and special education. So my administrator was kind of the same thing. Was the characteristics of a great administrator was just the knowledge and the experience of special education. So being at those meetings, knowing the process, understanding state and federal laws, understanding the budget. So her biggest characteristics were really built around knowledge and expertise. I asked them if they had any additional information that they would like to share with me, whether it was comments, questions, or anything like that. And for my paraprofessional, he got back into what he's struggling with, the transition, and unfortunately, in his exact words, unfortunately in the Kansas City, Kansas school district, it's fairly easy to become a paraprofessional, but that position is such a need that at times he doesn't feel like the right folks are hired for those positions. For my teacher, she's, additional information that she wanted to share was that she monitors her students daily. She wants to see how they're progressing in class, or what's their MAP scores. She talked about the Easy CBM test, which is a test that is very comparable to what gen ed students take. And if the special education student does well in that test, then with the daily data they collect, then this could help with that student transitioning to collaborative classes or gen ed classes. She talked about the exceptionality title, so she really aligned and connected the IEP to what their exceptionality title is, and that, why do they have an IEP? Is it a learning disability, intellectual, cognitive disability, things like that. My teacher, she was big on talking about the infrastructure, about the environment, about all these individuals, the specialists and the therapists that come in, and making sure that students' needs are met. So they had time with all their adaptive classes, but they had space, they had time, they had freedom, they had privacy, so that students' needs are met. So the final part of my presentation is the thoughts and projections on the future and on my role as an administrator. So my thoughts and some of my new learning was I had a fairly, a pretty good grasp of, the IEP. I knew they met, but I didn't know they met once a year. I did not know that it was reviewed every quarter. I had no idea about the amendments. I thought a student was, I was under the impression that a student was in special education for a certain amount of time, 2 or 3 years, but to see that there could be amendments to their IEP and they could start that transition process is something I did not know. The exceptionality title that I just talked about. And then with my special education teacher, we did talk a lot about the difference between a 504 and an IEP. I didn't put that in any of the questions, but that was something that came up. So projections that I'm thinking about as a future administrator, and that's just understanding the complete process of an IEP. Understanding those accommodations and how I can support students. And if I have to handle discipline, what does their accommodation say? Is there something that there's a reason that they're acting the way they're acting? I need to make sure I understand, parental rights. My administrator was big on reading, and you see a couple of texts there that was suggested. Collaborating with as many individuals as possible. Try to find a way to provide time. I know the lack of plan time is a huge concern across the district, across, I've had to guess, teachers across the globe. Fully understanding paraprofessionals' roles and duties and what they should be doing, what they should not be doing. And then just, again, that last part is that conducive environment, that infrastructure that's really supports student learning and really enhances the achievement of all students for all things that I am definitely thinking about as a future administrator. That's my EDL 853 I hope you guys enjoyed it. I had fun putting it together. Take care and good luck to you guys.